Hi everyone, happy Q&A, happy Wednesday. Last week Chad and I did a video on cholesterol and talked about a patient that he had who brought in some lab testing and some things that just weren't very comprehensive about it and what was missed. And we had a lot of questions following that video that we did, and people are asking if maybe he would touch on some of those markers or some of the other things that are commonly missed on your routine annual blood test. So there's one in particular that I think we're going to talk about today, and maybe we'll just keep kind of doing this every couple of weeks because there's probably quite a few. But what's one today that we can talk about that you see that is really routinely missed?
The annual blood exam is usually just looking at a CBC, which is a complete blood count. That's like red blood cells, white blood cells. Is you look at a lipid panel, which is your cholesterol and triglycerides and that kind of thing. And then also the CMP, comprehensive metabolic panel. And that gives you liver markers, kidney markers. So those are the basic things. Sometimes you might look at TSH for thyroid, but there's so many other things that we want to look at on a routine basis at least once a year to check these markers, because they can really influence our general health, and they can also be really key early detection risk factor markers for a whole bunch of different chronic diseases. So a common one that I look at on everybody, and I think it really should be routine part of your typical annual exam or maybe even biannual exam, and it's a marker called homocysteine. I'll put it down here. So it's kind of a long name for a marker. Hopefully you can read that okay. But homocysteine is a really great marker because it tells us a whole lot about what's going on in the system. It can also be a really key risk factor marker for a whole bunch of things that I'll talk about. But also it's really, really easy to treat. If homocysteine is elevated, there's some really simple solutions that we have to treat. So I'll just go in a little bit to what this really means.
You say, real quick, you say that you look for this. So is this because you do a different kind of blood workup on someone, or is this something that, maybe we'll talk about that after?
Any typical LabCorp, Quest, whatever lab your doctor uses, homocysteine should definitely be a marker that is very easy for them to ask for. It's not some wacky marker. It's something that is commonly known. Unfortunately, it's just not commonly run. And I'm not sure why it's not commonly run. I've got my cynical maybe reasons why. When I get to how to fix this, I'll mention probably why it's not oftentimes run. But homocysteine is produced by an amino acid called methionine, and this is called the methyl cycle. I won't write it there. It's just called the methylation cycle or the methyl cycle. And methylation is a really key process in the body that your body depends on for things like neurotransmitter production. Things like serotonin and dopamine in your brain totally require this whole methylation cycle to be working well. For DNA repair, our DNA gets nicked and damaged all the time. These repair mechanisms are totally dependent on methylation. Detoxification in our system, like our liver, hormone metabolism, cardiovascular function is very dependent upon proper methylation. So nearly every organ system in the body requires methylation to be working properly. But for a variety of reasons, this methyl cycle can get thrown off, and that could create kind of a whole, we'll talk maybe about a case study where this was kind of an interesting thing. I've seen homocysteine elevated in multiple cases, but one kind of comes to mind that we can talk about a little bit.
Yeah.
But so real quick, homocysteine is a really key marker that evaluates how well you're methylating. If your homocysteine is elevated, your methylation is poor, it's low. If your homocysteine is low, your methylation is doing really good. So it's a really simple evaluation on a blood test. We typically want to see homocysteine below 9 on a test. Most lab ranges go all the way up to 15. More current literature is saying 15 is way too generous of a reference range. We want to see it at 9 or less for really optimal levels.
So you as a naturopathic doctor, anyone who practices functional medicine wants to see it in a 9. However, if you go to your regular doctor and it's a 15, they're going to say that's fine.
Yeah, if you see it above 9, that's a problem, what the current literature is saying. And so you want to see it below 9. If it's above 15, that's even a bigger problem.
Okay.
But we definitely want to see it at 9 or less.
And if the homocysteine is elevated, then you're not methylating. The
Yeah,
cycle's
then you're not
off. Okay,
methylating
okay,
correctly.
got it.
And here's what really keeps the methylation process going. It's folic acid.
Like what you need when you're pregnant, right?
Yeah, exactly. So you need folic acid to keep this process going. And so folic acid we get from foliage. We oftentimes get it from veggies. There's some foods that are fortified with folic acid because it's such a common nutrient to not get enough of that certain food manufacturers put folic acid in the foods just to ensure that we have it. But folic acid has to get sort of activated, and folic acid has to get converted to 5-methylfolate. And 5-methylfolate requires a particular enzyme that makes that conversion. And some people have a genetic mutation to that enzyme. So without going too deep into that rabbit hole, just understand that sometimes when homocysteine is elevated, it's because of a genetic problem that we call MTHFR, methylene tetrahydrofolate reductase. This is an enzyme that converts folic acid into 5-methylfolate. And so maybe we'll have a separate Q&A on MTHFR, but MTHFR is a very simple genetic test that can be evaluated to find out if a person has an issue converting folic acid into 5-methylfolate. And you need this process to happen to keep homocysteine humming along. And one of the key reasons why homocysteine in this whole cycle is important is because from this cycle, we produce something called glutathione. Glutathione is like your antioxidant superhero. It's made in pretty much all your cells, and it's really, really important, very, very strong antioxidant. So a lot of the things that make us sick and make us kind of injured and make us unhealthy is too much oxidative damage, free radical damage, inflammation in the system. And glutathione is very good at quenching that free radical inflammatory damage. And if we have a problem with this whole methylation cycle, that limits your body's ability to produce this super, super important antioxidant, glutathione.
Let's talk about, because I think you'll share a case study that you were talking about, but so I don't know how we started talking about this last night, but I said, let's do a video on it because it's really important, obviously. What are all the harmful things that can happen to your body if your homocysteine is off?
Well, some ways that it manifests, since we need proper methylation to make neurotransmitters in the brain, think of like serotonin. A lot of people are taking a serotonin reuptake inhibitor as an antidepressant medication. So oftentimes people with depression, and then particularly if they have got like a family history of depression, like there's kind of a whole line of people in the family that have depression, they might have a genetic mutation to this enzyme not allowing them to convert folic acid into 5-methylfolate, so it's stunting this whole methylation cycle. So if you can't methylate, you can't make proper levels of serotonin. And so oftentimes if you can't make serotonin, depression is a really common symptom of low serotonin. And it could come all the way back to this folic acid thing. So that's one of the case studies I was going to mention. I had a patient with chronic depression. She's been on multiple antidepressant medications, and none of them were really a home run. And so I said, has this been evaluated? And the answer was no. So I said, let's have a look at your homocysteine. That was just the first blood marker that we looked at. Homocysteine was elevated. It was pretty elevated. And so I said, okay, you got a problem with this methylation cycle. Let's check your genetics, because we knew that there's a family history of depression. And sure enough, she had a mutation to the genetics that make this enzyme.
That would even allow this to go.
Right.
Okay.
And so by helping her take a supplement, and also we did some nutrient injections of 5-methylfolate, the activated form of folic acid, that helped this cycle to work better, allowed her to make her own serotonin, and that led to a better outcome. But there's lots of other symptoms that could, depression isn't the only symptom that's related to problems with your homocysteine and your methylation. There could be other things. There could be hormone issues. There could be cardiovascular issues.
That's what we talked about too last night, a cardiovascular incident too.
Yeah, so I've got a case where I'm working with a couple family members, not our family members, but there's two family members that have a very similar process going on in their system, and it's because One of the reasons is because of this homocysteine problem. Homocysteine itself is not just a lab marker. It's a substance floating around in your bloodstream, and homocysteine is very abrasive on the inside of your blood vessels, so it can kind of scratch and ding and irritate the inside of your blood vessels, and then your body wants to patch that up. If you get too much patching of an area that's has scratches and dings and dents in it, then too much patching is going to cause that blood vessel to narrow.
Constrict, yeah.
And so homocysteine could be a risk factor for cardiovascular disease. So we've talked about multiple aspects that this is involved in. And doesn't it make sense that everybody's homocysteine should be evaluated?
Well, that's why I wanted to share this with you today, because I didn't even know about it. I didn't know what homocysteine was, and we talked about it last night, and Chad sharing these 2 case studies that he had. The one I do want to say though too, the one patient you had, she came and she sees him as a chiropractor. He's a chiropractor as well, but just came in for chiropractic, and Chad happened to say, hey, I know you go to a regular, family doctor or whatever, and have they checked this? So that's what was so cool, that she wasn't coming into him for that, but he was able to put the pieces together. So, yeah, I think that's pretty cool.
So real quick, I'll just do a really brief overview of what we have to do to treat this. So first of all, we need that methylated form of folic acid. It's just called 5-methylfolate. But to help your 5-methylfolate, we also need some vitamin B12. B12 kind of helps your folate to be circulated. And to go from homocysteine and to make this really important antioxidant called glutathione, we need vitamin B6. So isn't that cool? Some really simple B vitamins. But the quality of these B vitamins is very, very important. We want activated forms of these B vitamins. We want methylated forms of these B vitamins. So the type really matters. But so my cynical reason why maybe some like family practice practitioners don't evaluate for homocysteine is because you don't need like a drug. You don't need some major procedure to fix this. All you need is some simple B vitamins. And I think in some ways, it's almost beneath, certain people's idea of what medicine is to just prescribe some B vitamins, or they're just completely not knowledgeable about this whole cycle and how important certain levels of B vitamins are to the system.
So, okay, I've heard that to the MTHFR mutation, there's like 30% of people have that. Is that true? Because that's significant. We're not talking 5%, 10%. We're talking 30%.
A pretty big chunk of the population has a mutation to MTHFR. And there's different degrees. You know how you get 2 copies of every gene? We actually look at 2 different genes. And so you can have 2 mutated copies, or you can have 1 mutated copy of each of those genes. And then you can have either both genes or just one of them. And so there's a severity of mutation to this enzyme, or to the genes that make this enzyme, but that could all be evaluated when we take the guesswork out.
So if you have this, would it be fair to say that this methylation process definitely is going to be inhibited? It's not going to be...
It's very likely. We want both parts of information. We don't just want the genetics. We don't just want the homocysteine, particularly if it's elevated. We want to have both, because that allows us to give you a more comprehensive treatment plan.
So there again, I asked this last week, going to your standard doctor, are they going to be, okay, if you ask them to check for homocysteine, even do the genetic marker for this, are they going to know what to do, or not really? I mean,
depends on the doctor. There's more and more doctors that are being educated in homocysteine and the methylation cycle and the importance of this whole process. So it's information that's getting out there. I don't think it's getting out there fast enough, but it's something that I hope your doctor has heard of. I hope they know what to do to fix it. And it's something that you should definitely ask for on your annual or biannual exam.
Okay, real quick, because I have this question too. I'm sure people do. So your 2 patients, or the patients that you're talking about, the ones with cardiovascular issues, and then the other one who you found that she had this as well. What, with the treatment, I'm assuming you gave them B vitamins, a good quality B vitamin. How are they feeling now? Or were they blown away by this, or just the simple fix, or what?
Yeah, both of them are being treated comprehensively beyond just homocysteine and methylation. So there's multiple aspects to their treatment. But yeah, I can think of a handful that fall into this category and this helps really, really significantly. They're definitely doing better. They're out of that kind of risk factor range where, it can really lead to some serious long-term illness. So yeah, it helps. It's fairly easy to treat, but you want to take the guesswork out, and you don't want to just jump to the treatment assuming you have this problem. You want to get tested, because we don't want to have somebody follow a treatment plan without diagnosing first. You want to diagnose first and then follow the treatment plan.
Right. So don't go run out and just get some B6 and B12 and assume that you have this. So, right? To sum it up. Okay. Hope you guys have a good day, and we'll be back next week. Bye.
See ya.